Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, the ANC in Gauteng is taking disciplinary action against its Ekurhuleni leader, Masina. The party says he ignored an instruction to withdraw a no-confidence motion against Mayor Tanya Campbell. The Gauteng PC says Masina has brought the ANC into disrepute. Let's discuss this further now. We're joined by political analyst Thamsanqa Malinga. Mr. Malinga, good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Nomfundo, and good afternoon to all your viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Before we actually get to the decision to discipline, can we talk about Mzwandile Masina's conduct itself? Where do you stand on his conduct to decide to forge ahead with that no-confidence motion? And even now, what we saw happened, according at least to reports, where he defied an instruction where there was some sort of an agreement with the economic freedom fighters for their candidate to stand and not the African National Congress candidate to stand.
Well, the whole thing started with the Ekurhuleni conference when, there was the issue of the votes that were
the quarantine
votes. And it went ahead and it got to a point where there was the provincial conference and Panyaza was elected. And I remember he was asked as to what will you do with the issue of the Ekurhuleni quarantine votes. And Panyaza's response was the Ekurhuleni issue needs a political solution. And that therefore means that they were sweeping that issue under the carpet. So it now gave Mzwandile the issue that he was, the concept that he was untouchable, because they dealt with the issue of the quarantined votes. Then it means that the whole thing could have turned against him. It gives the impression that...
So it emboldened him in some way or another.
Yes, it emboldened him in some way or another. It created him to be some sort of a demigod in Ekurhuleni, to say that this is my area, I am untouchable here, So the quarantined votes now makes us question whether were those votes really tilting the scale against him or not. Yeah.
But if we go with this concept of him perhaps now having been emboldened and somewhat of a demigod, some would say, but he's no stranger to controversy, or at least being out of line insofar as the ANC is concerned. He's tweeted quite a number of times. He's been disciplined. I remember back in 2020, he actually tweeted an article agreeing with Julius Malema about collapsing the white economy. He was scolded there, got a bit of a tongue lashing. So generally, would we say this is true Mzwandile Masina style, or you're still confining it to it was what happened with the quarantine votes?
It is true Masina style, but also with the fact that everything that then unfolded afterwards, it then gave him that impression that he is untouchable. Him also organizing the tea parties at Nkandla and not being reined in, created that he's now, a law unto himself. I think...
Because he's a regional leader, but one that has a presence nationally. I mean, when he tweets, many would go and check what he's tweeted. Like you say, he's one that would facilitate the tea that was being had in Nkandla. So really, he also somehow preoccupies the minds of South Africans or those within his party on a national level as well.
Yeah, but one of his friends, so to speak, if for lack of better word, Julius now has called him a sort of a Bantustan leader. He captures it quite well, because he's now treating that region as if it is his own Bantustan. He's now created that impression. He's now created impression that this is my fault. You cannot touch me here, and by you not touching me here, and I have now also went on further to make sure that I garner enough support at a national level to an extent that I am untouchable. So it has now created that demigod, that of that type of a leader who wants to be a leader within a broader movement that's got its own leadership. But
does he enjoy support? If we look at the Ekurhuleni dynamics, does he enjoy a lot of support? Because going into that Ekurhuleni conference, it seemed he didn't. It was touch and go at some point. And like you say, even with the quarantine votes, it remains a question mark in some quarters. So does he really enjoy that full support in the region itself for him to be now sort of fighting with the province when one would assume he's got a load on his shoulders with just the region itself?
He enjoys factional support, not a broader support of the region. You know, there's a WhatsApp that's going around. In as much as its veracity hasn't been tested, you know, there is that. If you listen to that WhatsApp, it talks about what has happened, you know, how it's so good that we did what we did, you know, with not going with what the PEC wanted. We would rather get whatever salaries that we're getting rather than having given the mayorship to the EFF.
Which is something he said to many media houses, that this was a principled approach. He felt that in those negotiations there was a tone of arrogance from the other political parties, and he felt that they needed to salvage whatever dignity the ANC had, and it was to do away with those agreements. So he probably sits at home and feels he's probably the only person who tried to save the dignity of the ANC, because he's of the view that the other parties were negotiating in a way that placed or would advantage them and disadvantage the ANC significantly.
But that was his view and that of his faction, not the view of the broader, you know, Ekurhuleni caucus or Ekurhuleni delegation. It is just him and his faction that just believes in that. It's not even the view of the province that said, let us try to salvage the metros because we need the metros in going into the national general elections.
But
yes.
Giving the EFF a metro, many assume that should they get it, they would really want to put their best foot forward. And if they did, it became functional, it might spell the end for the African National Congress. Do you think that is a legitimate argument in some quarters, that they would make sure, yes, they would assist you as the EFF to give you Johannesburg, but you give them a metro, they would make sure that that becomes that one metro that might garner a lot of support for them in future to say, here's the test case, we can govern. So it becomes, or does it not become, a very difficult one if you're a political party and still wanting to survive beyond 2024?
Yes, you have to look at the issue of survival to say, if we give them a metro, we have to look at strategically which metro are we giving them. You don't want to give them Johannesburg. You don't want to give them Tshwane. You say, let's give them a metro that is basically probably on the outskirts. Ekurhuleni is a test case. Let's use Ekurhuleni as a test case. We have to give them Ekurhuleni, but one, it's for a reason that we say, as the ANC, we want to make sure that they do not grow in Johannesburg and surrounding areas, because if they grow in Johannesburg, it will spell disaster for us. If the EFF grows in numbers in Johannesburg, it will spell disaster for us. So if they do well in Ekurhuleni, they grow in numbers at Ekurhuleni, well, we will be able to battle it out with them at Ekurhuleni.
How so? How so? Because ordinary citizens would be seeing this as that test case. If they do well, they might then be enticed to say, let's try them in another metro.
They will have quite a number of challenges there. Remember, at Ekurhuleni, you have towns like your Boksburg, like your Brakpan. They will have to battle the ultra-rights there. So they
might encounter a challenge.
Yes, their growth will also be very, very challenging, because
so just here,
they will have to deal with those.
On the PEC, apologies, we seem to be running out of time. Yes. On the PEC, though, do you think He could be suspended. What could be the outcome? Just looking at the gravity of the offence.
Well, he could be suspended, but the voices of reason will have to say, let us not do that.
Ahead of the conference, with ambitions to be a TG himself.
Besides, they don't want to send a divided Gauteng to the conference. They don't want to send a divided Gauteng to the conference.